Well, okay, so the first speaker, if you're ready, you can begin.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so just ready, opponents ready? My time starts now. We affirm the resolution. During the cost and benefit analyzed in today's debate, life should be the #1 consideration, since life is a prerequisite to all else. Contention when fighting human trafficking. Human trafficking is the third largest crime industry in the world today. 40.3 million people worldwide are victimized. India has an estimated 18.3 million slaves, with about 200,000 Indian children kidnapped every year. A girl is sold into slavery every minute. Australian analytic firm Quantian developed a personal data solution named Operation Red Alert. The solution analyzes sensor data, education data, along with other sources for factors so as to identify the villages and towns that are most at risk of human trafficking. Red Alert now has conducted education programs in 600 villages throughout just 4 states in India, reaching over 600,000 villages, protecting them from human trafficking. Another investigative analytic platform, Minerva, used data analysis techniques to identify nearly 1,000 victims in just a 2-month time span. In 2017 alone, there were 100,000 victims identified. Contention to improving healthcare. Subpoint A. Mobile data reduced malaria cases in Zambia by 93%. Despite medical progress, malaria is still a huge killer worldwide. Looking for developing disease transmission patterns and overlying data on maps to show movements and travel patterns on mobile devices, companies Taboo and Path help to eliminate malaria in the region. By understanding the travel pattern of people, the ministry can better manage both prevention and treatment programs. As the ministry illustrate, before you could see malaria cases across the entire region, but you couldn't see it at a district level. By localizing data, they can be more accurate with the allocation of limited resources. In 2 rainy seasons, cases of malaria have been reduced by a staggering 93%. Subpoint B, solving drug abuse. According to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, opiate drugs are involved in more than 42,000 deaths in 2016 nationwide. According to the American Society of Addiction Medicine, opiate addiction is related directly to overprescription of painkillers, as including 160,000 adolescents are using prescription painkillers for non-medical purposes every year. As a solution, PDMP initiative was implemented to identify patients with normal opiate habits by analyzing personal information from online platforms such as Twitter and Reddit. PDMP's implementation resulted in a 30% drop in the rate of prescription for opiates within 6 months, along with 33.9% reduction over utilization of opiate-related drugs. Contention 3, disaster response. Vast amounts of data are created during time of disaster, including personal and medical data. Global nonprofit HeadHope has partnered with Facebook to target social media audiences by sending the right messages and information from Doctors Without Borders. Local nonprofits, etc., would help communities to better self-organize and respond to emergencies when disaster strikes. Mobile network operates in Nepal and Sri Lanka have developed early warning of system to increase the preparedness of communities living in risk-prone areas by alerting people in this region of potential danger and providing instructions via social media platform. Sickles helps take advantage of the latest mobile networking technology to initiate humanitarian assistance when disaster strikes, often faster than government or local providers can. Even a basic text message or phone call can be a lifesaver. During the core outbreak in 2011, tech company Digicel and Hattie sent, on the basis of the presented analysis on population movement, text people messages with health information to all mobile phones that passes through the outbreak area. Impact. According to World Economic Forum, in 2020, over 5.7 billion people are connected to mobile, and Untitled has responded to 45 disasters on 6 continents. The platform has been used in 140 countries, saving more than 20 million people through more than 100,000 deployments. We're enabling more effective disease response and direct life-saving. 2015 earthquake in Nepal, and 2016 earthquakes in Italy, and the ongoing refugee crisis in the Middle East and Europe highlight the critical role of mobile technology and access to communication and personal data. Thus, we urge a pro-ballot. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Concise.
Opponents ready? Judge ready? The time will start. Now, we negate the resolution framework. This debate should be centered around the minorities. Whichever team that protects the minorities better should win, as they are the foundations of a society, and revolutions are dangerous. Definition. According to the European Union, personal data is any information that relates to identifiable living individual. Contention 1, predictive policing. First, facial recognition is only 8% accurate and falsely targets colored people. According to Wire, police departments pay tech company to use facial recognition technology, which identify persons of interest against a collection of millions of faces in real time. The company provides a system to rights and target communities of color. A system tested was only 8% accurate. No regulations govern police use of facial recognition technology. And second, predictive policing worsens police brutality, according to The Intercept. Arrest data from agencies remains inaccessible to the public. More than 10.5 million arrests made every year are for non-criminal behavior, and racial disparities in enforcement have grown even more stark, and police solve only a fraction of the crimes that are reported. Furthermore, predictive policing targets 400,000 people. According to RAND, no algorithm is to ever predict a crime. The names of only 3 victims were on Chicago police list. 99% of the homicide victims were not, which means that they're not predicting crime at all. More importantly, according to Southside Weekly, there are almost 400,000 people on the list. The majority of people are Black. According to TNW, 13 of the U.S. police state jurisdictions had engaged in bias practices and built predictive policing systems. Impact. We have 2 layers of impact. First of all, riots. According to BBC, discrimination has led to genocides and millions are killed in, for example, the Holocaust of the Jews and the violent riots in the United States. And second, according to GSDRC, inequality leads to violence, military aggression, and recession. Contention 2, targeting the poor. According to independent.ie, tech companies are using personal data to target user for ads. Companies are targeting people for ads based on personal data. Terms to target include abuse and eating disorders. First, advertisement targeting the uneducated and fool them into buying unhealthy fast food. According to Conversation, more than half of the adverts target poor Black people or for unhealthy foods, make false claims about the foods being healthy. They target vulnerable viewers who are not educated and take value. When they buy and consume these products, it puts them at the risk of diseases. The children and females are the most vulnerable ones. More importantly, the National Health Service and OHA says that 20 million are exposed to fast food commercials and 1.9 billion people are exposed to ads through Facebook alone. Watching Target commercial was linked to a 21% increased chance of buying food advertised. Second, tech companies make the poor buy more than what they can afford, targeting poor consumers by purchasing this data, then use the information to sell risky financial products to the people who can least afford them. Data industry wiggle room when it comes to enforcing the terms, which proves to you that the banning of the ads does not work. Furthermore, marketing materials identify underbanked consumers who have procured loans at high interest. Collaborative filtering is extremely effective in persuading people to spend money, draining their pockets dry. According to an analysis on the millions of JP Morgan Chase bank accounts, 2/3 of American households will not be able to sustain 6 weeks of living without their expected income, making them especially vulnerable. Without income, they will die. The coronavirus is also pushing another 500,000 into poverty. Worstream says that 64% of all online customers purchasing are influenced by video-targeted advertisement, and Velop says that impulse buying is destroying families, and for all the reasons of all we urge a compound. Thank you.
Thank you. And first, crossfire. Prep time will just start.
I'll take running prep.
Yeah, running prep for the pro, please.
Okay, I'm ready. So, judge ready? Opponents ready? My time starts now. My first question, which countries are using predictive policing?
Well, America and the UK, we told you how there's only 8% accuracy in the UK, and as well as 400,000 people are targeted.
Does all your evidence strictly say that because of technology companies using personal data?
Oh, I did not hear that. Can you restate it?
Does all of your evidence strictly say that because of technology companies using personal data rather
Yes,
than the
our
police?
evidence explicitly says that police departments are paying tech companies to use facial recognition technology. And moving on to my question, how exactly are you using personal data when malaria doesn't even spread from person to person? It's not in practice.
What we're doing is that we're actually giving them those resources. We're not actually separating them. We're only locating people to be more specific areas. We're locating them to a district as an example, and then giving them resources, an example, the medicine they need to actually cure. And that's how we actually are curing those people.
So locating resources is your only link. Is that true or not?
we're using technology companies' personal data to actually locate where the people are and give them
Yeah, the
resources.
next question.
Okay, now my question is, how is the Holocaust you mentioned related to this debate?
All right, that is our impact. We tell you that predictive policing is what exacerbates inequality, and inequality has led to Holocaust as well.
Okay, a follow-up. How much inequality does it exacerbate?
We tell you that there's only an 8% accuracy and 400,000.
At 8% accuracy doesn't mean that it's directly
And
actually
also,
caused by technology companies.
to
It doesn't mean that actually that is the impact. That's not the impact. We need to term out impact.
400,000 people were targeted, and the majority of people are Black. We tell you that this worsens police brutality because simply by
Okay, we tell that actually those algorithms that are made by the technology companies are not to target Black. It's the police officials that are using those algorithms to actually target the individuals, and that the police officials, targeting Black people rather than the algorithms that technology companies made.
Yeah,
why is that actually ever relevant to the technology companies' use personal data?
which is predictive policing. So using this tool provided by tech company using personal data, which is
They're using this tool. However, this tool is actually, the tool doesn't know that what's actually racial discrimination, right? The tool is actually neutral. The people, the police officers, are the ones who are actually using this tool to do bad things.
If police do strictly follow the rules and the outcomes that provided by it, it will still lead to inaccurate outcomes and arrests that are, for example,
no, what you're saying is actually like racial discrimination, right? However, we tell that racial discrimination. Are you saying that racial discriminate? Are you saying that algorithms themselves can actually just see Black people and then they do bad things for Black people rather than the white?
And moving on to my question.
Okay.
So further contention on PDMP, it has already been settled by Congress. So what's the impact?
Okay. However, we need your evidence. Like, who said it's already banned by Congress?
Long enough we can provide a piece of evidence on that. We prove to you that there's no valid.
Give me the evidence.
Okay, we'll read that later.
Hi, Ms. App, thank you. And proceed your reports.
Running prep for the pro, please.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. Let me just quickly set up my timer, and I'll give this time to the judges to adjust your volumes. I will be speaking a little bit louder than this during my rebuttal. Okay, now, you all hear me clearly. Good? We're all good? Okay, cool. If everybody's ready, then my time starts now. Judge, I urge you to look at their case as a whole. All their evidence given is either from the United States and taking them at the best from the United States. It's from the United Kingdom, the two wealthiest countries in the world, we can say. And yet they run a framework telling you they are here to help the most vulnerable group of people. They're here to help the minorities. Looking at our case, we tell you we solve diseases, malaria from Zambia and Tanzania, and we prevent crisis from happening to Nepal. If you're voting off their framework, you can sign a pro ballot right here. Even if you don't buy that. Moving on, we tell you, pointing out all their evidence from the United States and UK, we can say all their evidence is based off a really cultural thing. Moving on to their first contention about predictive policing. First of all, we tell you they give you no empirical evidence. According to Science News, there's no empirical studies on the bias uniquely brought by predictive algorithms used by police patrol. Proved by the Los Angeles predictive policing experiments. We found that there's no significant difference in the proportion of arrests by racial ethnic groups between control and treatment conditions. This is further proven by FBI report 2018. Of all arrests, 69% are white, which is the vast majority, followed by 27% African Americans, 2.1% Indians, and 1.2% Asians. White arrests are 2 times much more as African American arrests. The truth speaks for itself. Then moving on. Even though by this link, looking at their impact tells you about Holocaust. They say inequality leads to Holocaust, but during the Holocaust, there's no technology companies let alone using personal data. This proves one point telling that inequalities and racial discriminations exist long before technology companies are using personal data, which adds an extra burden to the con side. They have to prove to you specifically that using personal data adds and exacerbates the current existing discrimination, or else all the discrimination and Holocaust things that they're talking about is currently existing in the society. It's a social norm problem, not a technology companies using personal data problem. Moving down to the second contention about targeted pricing. First of all, we tell you technology companies are checked constantly for targeted pricing. The Algorithmic Accountability Act 2019 had already required the large companies to audit machine learning powered system for bias. Companies would have to assess whether the algorithms powering these tools are biased or discriminatory. Earlier in 2017, New York has passed an algorithmic transparency bill, while Washington State held hearings from similar measures in February. Our regulations encourage companies to do algorithmic reviews by themselves to correct underlying errors. Example given, that's how Xiecheng, a Chinese traveling app, made sure that they're charging Android and Apple users the same price for same and similar products. Also, if technology companies use cookies to recognize somebody, the e-privacy directory requires the companies to inform the person about the cookie's purpose and require consent from such pricing, which leads to our second response. We tell you this contention doesn't stand because there's no empirical solvencies. What does this mean? Is there's just nothing we can really do about it, even if this crisis exists. Let me further explain. First of all, if targeted ads are too persuasive and making people to buy stuff, then what's your solvency? Banning all ads? Then how do you adjust? Are you banning all ads because they are simply too persuasive and making people eat fast foods and getting obese? And then how do you measure persuasiveness? Do you have a scale? I'm 70% persuasive compared to my opponent. So basically their plan is an intrinsic problem that cannot be solved. Thus, it doesn't have any solid impact. Moving on. Even if talking about the impact about overspending, right? We tell you this is a really specific cultural issues because in the US, they don't have the culture of saving up monies. Well, if you look at other cases in China, we tell you according to ChinaNet, most of the consumers are rational. Even with targeted ads, about 70% will keep their monthly bill within the 2/3 of their credit limit. And 99% Chinese citizens pay their credit card debts on time. With our case rebut, we would like to move some issues mentioned in the crossfire. First of all, my opponents point out that malaria is not spread from person to person. I strongly suggest you Googling it up. Although malaria is not, the root cause is not from person to person, but still those infected still can pass around to other people. And that's what we are trying to solve. We're quarantining those people while providing solutions and drugs to treat them from malaria. Thank you.
Thank you. And Konsai?
I'm going to take a running prep starting now. Okay, 52 seconds used. Is everyone ready? Judge ready? Opponents ready? A time will start. Now, first, let's look at their first contention when talking about fighting human trafficking, right? A couple of responses. First, we directly Googled their so-called Red Alert program. It says big data analytics coming from 2017, August 24th. That directly counters their whole contention one. Why? Because it's not personal data, it's big data analytics, it's non-topical. Even if you don't buy that, moving on to their actual argument, we tell you that according to Migration Policy Institute, there is very limited information on scale of trafficking, how it works, and the most effective means to have it. Despite the growing literature on trafficking, relatively few studies are based on extensive research, and information on the actual numbers of people trafficked remains very sketchy. We'll say to prove their own evidence only comes from India, which we specifically checked. And human trafficking is complex and dynamic. It is worldwide, but exact numbers are hard to come by. It follows patterns, but every situation is also unique. There's not much to learn from, and so much misinformation already out there. Here's what we really know. In 2018, Polaris worked on 10,949 cases of human trafficking reported. It's notoriously being underreported. So even under their scenario that human trafficking is being solved, we say that the data itself is corrupted and mistaken. Even you don't buy that, we give you the third response. According to informationage.com, the global cost of cybercrime is estimated to reach $2 trillion by 2019, a threefold increase, and 48% of data security breaches are caused by acts of malicious intent in human error. Moving on to their second contention, talking about healthcare. First, we focus on malaria. According to National Geographic, one of the most effective methods of reducing malaria in sub-Saharan Africa is the use of insecticide-treated nets, or ITN, developed in 1980s. It can reduce malaria cases by 20% and saving the lives of thousands of children per year. We also have a card saying that malaria nets are only cost $2. We don't feel like there's a need to collect every single person's individual information in order to get malaria done. And we also believe that the mobile application does not apply to the whole world generation. Moving on to your sub-1 B, talking about opiate drug abuse. A couple of responses. First, we tell you that the use of opiate is growing. They have no benefit provided. According to Drug Topics in 2020, the opiate crisis continued to be one of the worst public health crises that the U.S. has ever seen. According to CDC, opiates were involved in 47,600 overdose in 2017, and an increase of over 67%. And approximately 2 million Americans live with opiate use disorder. 2, Healthline provides a list of the most frequently used anti-opiate treatments, and none of them has anything to do with personal data. We believe that this problem is uniquely solved regardless of this topic or not. 3, we tell you even if you don't buy that, we would attack them directly on their link of PDMP. We tell you that according to Macathodic, when we sent out the last MCC weekly update, the PDMP legislation was in question at the Senate for fist-bullying the bill. Unfortunately, the bill was laid over by the Senate and never brought up in a final scale. 3, we tell you that limiting the deaths to those caused by prescription opiate pain medication, 85% got pain medicine from one doctor themselves, got it free from a friend or relative, or bought or took it from a friend or a relative. So that would mean personal data or online purchasing has nothing to do with the actual opiate drug abuse, and it's not, personal data is not going to help. Moving on to their third contention, disaster responses. We're just generally going to answer that they cannot handle these data handling, for example, the humanitarian aids. Sweeping European privacy regulations are focusing on humanitarian sector to radically rethink how it handles data on tens of millions of people, interviews with experts in aid industry, insiders review. Aid agencies in Europe will have to change the way they fundraise at home and get our data abroad to comply with strict EU data protection regulations that come into place in May. It also puts particular limits on the use of biometric data like fingerprints or eye scans. And aid agencies handle sensitive personal data about refugees and hostile patients have been loose control, and the estimated humanitarian caseload for 2018 is some 90 million people. Overwhelmingly, the data is not held in digital form and may include biometrics, which is violating GDPR rule. That means we rule out their whole content 3 because that's not even included in the UI usage of personal data. A strong count out. Thank you.
Thank you. The second crossfire.
Okay, everybody ready? Then my time starts now. Okay, let's talk about malaria, right? The response you gave for malaria. Using nets are prevention. You said it can decrease it by 20%. What do you do with the people who are already infected?
We treat them with medical resources, but not through personal data collection, because the people who are actually, like, for example, attached with malaria don't even have the source to access their mobile apps, right?
No, it's not mobile apps. My mobile data is their mobility data we're tracking, like where people work, how did they travel, like where do they stay. And yet, a quick follow-up. We agree with you that we are using medical devices to treat them, but that leads to our central link of our second contention, that people in rural districts cannot be reached. So we need personal data to reach them, right? So without a specific device to find out those individuals, how do you plan to distribute the drugs to people that's unseen on the map?
First of all, we tell you that distributing of maps or gaining, for example, remote healthcare doesn't require personal data, right? Like as simple as put, we can just sign up to websites and just link on it. It doesn't need to know where I come from or which specific region I am living in. All I can get is from CVS or an online store. It doesn't require.
But you just said they don't have mobile phones. How do they access online data?
Well, how do you access it with remote? If you're saying that remote healthcare is being delivered, then tell me how those people without mobiles can access
That's where technology companies kicks in. That's why we tell you Tableau and Plath directly went to Zambia to check on each person's statistics and gather personal data. This is undone by any hospitals or health organizations before. That's why personal data and technology companies, you cannot miss one and then still fulfill the other. You can have a question.
Okay, sure. How can you prove? Oh, okay, that doesn't really matter. Let's move on to our contention one, talk about predictive policing, right? How do
Yeah.
you solve the fact that the facial recognition is only 8% accuracy?
Okay, we simply say don't use it anymore. Because like what percentage, like this debate, okay, I'm at, like, give me a quick second to answer your question. This debate fundamentally is about cost and benefits. So sure, we can agree that personal data will lead to some of the downsides. It's not perfect. Thus, we can definitely agree with you that 8% of the facial recognition is not accurate, but that's an easy problem to solve. We can directly not use it and kick it out of the system. If it's not sophisticated enough, don't use it. But that benefit, that harm you mentioned is in nowhere to weigh impact against all the lives we saved is the point.
Your argument is basically set upon we imagine that police departments just automatically set off all of the facial recognition technology, which is untrue. At least give me a card saying that police officers are planning to just eliminate all of their technology system to identify. Otherwise, we're living in status quo and this is happening.
Right. No, but in the status quo, we tell you it's an easy problem to solve, right? It's not like all those like malaria thing. You cannot give any alternatives. For this harms, it's really easy to just get rid of it.
Time is up. Thank you. And pro side, prep time will just start.
Running prep.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm ready to start. Judge ready? Opponents ready? My time starts, wait, let me see my time. My time starts now. Okay, so for the first contention on our side about human trafficking, our opponent said why it's actually big data rather than personal data. However, we strictly said during constructed speech where we're using sensor data, which is a part of personal data, to actually track those individuals and to actually help them with human trafficking, to prevent them, and to also identify those victims. In addition, we also tell that actually when they're actually happening in India, it means that they are having the service. They're able to actually have it in other poor countries because India itself is still, it's not a rich country. And they're basically saving minorities. They're being kidnapped in the rural areas. In addition, we tell that actually our opponents dropped our third contention about disaster prevention. They dropped how we're saving tens of thousands of people from actually telling them how to prevent those disasters and telling people in those areas how to actually make sure they're safe in the disasters. In addition, for our second contention about healthcare, our opponents said how actually there's no cell phones in the areas that people have malaria. However, we don't need a cell phone. We don't need a mobile app to actually identify those individuals. We don't need a mobile app to actually identify those ones who really need the medicine. The companies are basically going into the countries to actually have checks on those people who really need it, which hospitals are not able to do. And they're basically distributing these drugs and prevention to actually give it to those people in rural areas who can't actually get anything because they don't have a mobile service for a large proportion of them. In addition, we tell that actually for the opiate drugs, when people are getting it from offline, they still have, since this is actually internet world, they still have traces. People can still trace from everywhere, from the social media and everywhere else they're going, to actually see if they are actually using the opiates for on medical purposes. And this is easily seen actually when they're online, even if they didn't actually buy it online. Thus, we believe that we've actually offered you how actually millions of people are being saved, which is the most important human right we should consider. And also, we're actually helping the minorities in the area like Tanzania and saving them from diseases. Also, now looking for our opponent's contention, they said how actually there's only 8% accurate, there's only like 8% non-accurate for predictive policing, we tell that if it's actually so serious, then just don't use it. It's not a large proportion, and it's a very easy problem to be solved. Additionally, we tell that even if you don't buy that, it's the police officials that are basically having this predictive policing. Even the algorithm itself does not have any discrimination, because algorithms don't really know actually what's discrimination. They just see this as words, right? It's a police officials or police actually having discrimination. They're using this tool in a bad way, in a discriminative way. And that's why it's nothing to do with actually technology using personal data, and we shouldn't blame it on them. And then for their second contention about actually targeting the poor, we tell that it's already actually banned and people restricting this, it's actually regulated, and thus we believe they have a very low impact in this stand, thus we urge pro ballot.
You and Tongzai. I'm sorry, Tongzai, would you take prep time or just start? I'm sorry, we can't hear you. Okay.
Yeah, I think I'm good. Okay. Opponents ready? Ready? The time will start. Now again, the judge should vote for the minorities. Look at the rise triggered by inequality in the United States right now. Look at the potential waves of this content. When these minor groups of people feel deeply oppressed, they will rise up against the entity of oppression and express their unsatisfaction in terms of riots and violent conflicts. The key voting issue in our case is targeting the poor, as millions are attracted into overconsumption and they cannot further support themselves. We tell you that millions are exposed to target ads, and there's a 21% increased chance of buying the food advertised. They gave you 3 responses. Let's go through them. First of all, they read this whole pile rebuttal towards targeted pricing, but that is not even our contention, so it does not apply. And second, it is not our burden to give you a solvency. It is by any means a harm done by personal data used by tech companies and police agencies on the status quo. And third, we measure persuasiveness through 2 ways. First of all, we measure the difference between the money spent. If you spend a much more amount of money after the use of platforms with ads, that is a measure of overconsumption. And second, if you click into ads and buy the product, the company collects your data and measures the persuasiveness. And moving on to predictive policing, the response they gave you are, first of all, they say they're from a limited state, but even if they're from the United Kingdom and the United States only, we still prove to you that where personal data and predictive policing is being used, the harms are triggered. And second, there is empirical evidence. Our card literally tells you that there's only an 8% accuracy, and 400,000 people are on the list with only a list effective list. And we also gave you this card on how the 13 of the United States jurisdictions are actually engaging in biased practices. And third, we say inequality leads to Holocaust because the oppression and the uprising. And even if you think that is far-fetched, we still give you the example of the riots in the United States, which is still causing a tremendous impact. And lastly, they asked us to stop using predictive policing system. But first of all, we're debating about the status quo. And second, our magnitude also says that 13 of the US state jurisdictions are using dirty data, which is still a magnitude. Now let's look through their case, right? First of all, they say human trafficking. However, first of all, they're using big data and stock data, not personal data. And second, human trafficking data is crude and ineffective. And third, their only case comes from India, which has no magnitude and no appliance. And lastly, even in their ground, human trafficking is not solved. Look at the increased trends of human trafficking that is happening in 2020. And second, malaria. CDC literally says that malaria is not spread from person to person. So even if they're actually using data, they're using insect data instead of personal data, and they never give you a link on tech companies. Second, ITN is the most effective solution and it's very affordable. We do not need personal data as an alternative. And third, we treat people who are already infected through medication, which they have not responded to. And lastly, you do not need personal data. All you need is stock data. And moving on to solving drug abuse, we tell you that first of all, opioid drugs are still increasing. There is no solvency. And second, we tell you that PDMP is better, as well as the fact it is failing in saving life, which means that they have failed all their impacts and their links, and thus we urge on ballot. Thank you.
Thank you, and Grand Crossfire.
Cross? No, it's okay. Are we all ready?
Yes.
Okay, then time starts now. Okay, so let's talk about your opioid response, right? Can you tell me what is the year of your evidence saying that it started rising?
Oh, let me.
It's in 2017.
Okay, good. You can have a question.
Okay. So in our argument, second contention, subpoint B, talking about how those people are sold with risky financial products, and those are underbanked consumers who pay loans because of it. Tell us why is targeted ads harming them if you affirm?
Well, like, can you elaborate on the question? I didn't really get
I'm
that.
saying that people who are underbanked consumers have paid loans because they're sold risky financial products because of the targeted advertisements.
Yeah. So that's like your concept's impacts, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So that's why we give you the responses. We admit that targeted advertisements exist in the society. Like, that's how technology companies make money, right? But those harmful acts, we've given you a specific evidence saying that they're limited by multiple regulations telling them to check their algorithm bias and they cannot target the poor.
If that's true, why is 64% of all online consumers purchased and influenced by those targeted ads if there are so many regulations?
Be specific, 64% American citizens purchasing
No,
online.
all online consumers, not America.
Right. If you want to generalize to the entire globe, then you have to give
you like a very quick sentence when you question us about, we only have US example. We have US, UK, Europe, and China if you listen carefully. Go on.
Which example is correlated with China?
In the very last part where we say like the collaborative filtering, it's in our subpoint B. We can continue on your question.
I'm just asking, like, which evidence is your China trying to prove? Because I didn't hear any China-specific evidence, so I want to be clear on that.
Okay, I need to check my case for you.
And even if it actually includes China, it's still for big countries. What are the poor countries in Africa?
Okay, but the poor countries in Africa in your contention 1 and 2, I said that for example, crime rates are still increasing all along. We don't see how. Can you
provide us any evidence that are actually, like, you're basically been.
I told you that opiates what involved 47,600 overdoses.
However, we're also solving, right?
Sorry, what? How do you solve it when we said that those treatments or like those opiates are gained through family members and relatives?
You still leave a trace when you actually buy things. If you buy actually like something, even if it's offline, you can leave traces online. You might talk to someone and you might share it with someone.
Sorry, the problem is they don't buy it. They buy it from friends and family.
No, like even if they buy it from family and friends, they still communicate with others. They still do a lot of things online, and that leaves traces. It doesn't mean we just have to trace their buying records.
No, drugs are not.
Thank you. Roadside prep time just starts.
No, I don't need prep.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, checking. If everybody can hear me clearly, then my time starts now. Their case sends you 2 messages. First of all, it's all evidence is US, UK specific. Now, my opponent said they have China evidence, but we can agree on several points. First of all, their predictive policing is US or UK. Second of all, their impact of American households spending too much money is US. So now, looking at the specific points, we tell you they reaching out for the top, these group of people, like 2 most developed countries in the world, and telling they are considering the minorities completely doesn't fulfill the framework. If you're voting off their framework, the pro side is the one you should vote, because we directly solve malaria in Zambia and Tanzania, and we tell you we are doing predictive disasters that saved 2 million people in Nepal. So helping minorities, you should vote for the pro side. Even moving on, the second message the entire case sends you is that this ask their evidence specific, it's all really cultural specific. Looking at the predictive policing, we tell you predictive policing, they give you the example of the Holocaust. First of all, it happened way before technology companies or personal data usage, meaning that many of the discriminatory crisis is caused by some social norms that's intrinsic. For example, United States, hatred against people of color is something intrinsic. Personal data didn't pass the Jim Crow laws. Personal data didn't kneel on George Floyd's neck for 10 minutes until he suffocated. None of these is caused by technology companies or personal data. All of these are intrinsic to people's arrogance that happen in the United States. Taking it to anywhere other country that doesn't have such discrimination, predictive policing is just fine. Moving on to a second impact of overspending money. This is still impact very cultural specific, because we're really telling you in China, according to China Net, most of the consumers are rational. 70% keep up with their monthly bills, and 99% pays it on time. So now, the easiest way to vote for the con side is through impacts. First of all, even if they argue, we tell you that we are still saving 600 villagers in India. Although if that's not good enough, it's still the status quo, fulfilling the benefits of technology companies. Second, we tell you we solve malaria, decreased by 93%. They talk about like mosquito nets, but that's prevention. What do you do with the people diagnosed? Still, you have to send them Medicaid, and only technology companies can do this. And last but not least, the point entirely dropped by our opponents is our last point about this disaster prevention, which saves 20 million lives in rural Nepal. Thank you.
Con side.
Okay. Get ready? Everyone's ready? My time will start now. They questioned us on evidence for UK and US. I'm going to say there's no difference in countries to protect the minorities. They're saying that minorities in India and Africa matter more, while US and UK doesn't. It's a very simple and clear debate. Black lives matter, and poor people should not be misled to bankrupt. People should not get disease from twice or triple increase in consuming fast food. A clear-cut ballot is the moment when we bring up our contention won 10.5 million arrests. Only 3 out of 400 homicide victims are actually on Chicago's police list. How there are 400,000 people on the list, and a majority on the list are Black. Their response is first, it's an imagination. They said that we just throw away facial recognition, which is implemented in police departments broadly right now, without giving any evidence to prove at the end of this debate. Second, they tell us the evidence was white 69%. They never pointed us which region specifically their database is small and biased. Moving on to our contention 2. Their only response is saying, why don't we ban ads, or how persuasive it is. We tell you that targeted ads are making 20 million people exposed to fast food commercials, 2 to 3 times increasing the risk of dying from coronary disease by 50%, while they sell risky financial products to people who can least afford them, causing them to stuck in debt and die because of poverty and also because of coronavirus outbreak. We tell you that 64% of all online consumers purchasing are influenced by video targeted advertisements, which is a card that is so strong but it's never rebutted throughout the whole debate. Moving on to their contention. Their contention 1, we give you 3 responses. First is non-topical at all, because Red Alert is a big data analytics, not personal. Second, we tell you it's complex and dynamic. The data are notoriously underreported. 3, we tell you that cybercrime actually tripled to $2 trillion. Their contention 2, we give you 4 responses. First, its most effective method is reducing malaria by 20%. 2, use of opiate is still increasing. 3, there's anti-opiate treatment. 4, PDMP it gets from friends, doctors, and relatives. There's no link on website. Contention 3, we told them that the European and US or UN, which is providing humanitarian aid, cannot even handle the data, and the biometric data like fingerprints or eye scan for refugee and coronavirus are banned by GDPR. It's a strong combat. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. And now please wait a second. And Judge, when you are ready, you can give some feedback. And Judge, you can pronounce your results now.
So other judges, you should vote on the minute program so that we can know the result.
Okay.
Okay, we have the result now. So 2 for pro and 3 for con, so con wins. Okay, so I will do a very short feedback. So first, congratulations, and for both of you, you did a great job. And so here's my very short feedback. So why I choose con. Okay, so I basically made my decision based on 5 parts. The first is about human trafficking. I think pro one because con's data, you can't convince me to believe in your, your evidence. And the second one is about healthcare, about malaria. I think this one pro one because they explain how data and the tech company helps. And about the facial recognition, I think con one with concise arguments. And the fourth one, advertisements, con one, because the evidence pro offered was, unilateral. And the fifth one is about the racial discrimination. I think both of you failed because you have no clear linkage between your evidence, your examples of the topic. And considering all, I think con's evidence and framework were more consistent and attached more to the topic, so that I vote for con. So that's all. And so other judges.
I can start. I voted for con side as well. For me, I think I definitely get a lot of responses from pro side saying that how like discrimination and also consumption behavior is a cultural problem. However, I think well this statement does help to limit the scope and impact of pro side, but does not confront with the reality that con provided directly, which means that I think under this responses, a lot of arguments on con side still stand. What I value a lot from the response of discrimination arguments is how the evidence saying that 67% of the LA police department, like the majority of them are still white, but I don't think this evidence is utilized very well in the latter speeches of the debate rounds, whereas concept provides more than US evidence, including the UK evidence as well. So I think even if it's kind of like a Western world problem, it still stands, and the minority they are still struggling, which is not directly refuted by the conside. And similar problem for the target ask argument, I think, yeah, it is true that like the consumers in China tend to save more money so that they don't suffer from the same problem, but like that does not confront with the reality that like the American consumers are suffering. So I think it would be better if more direct responses against their arguments can be provided. And for pro side, I think you guys definitely won the human trafficking and malaria argument. I think the reason why I definitely value the malaria argument, but the reason why I do not value human trafficking argument that much is because I think the only link is the Indian case study that you provided with not that much significance. So that's the reason why, for me, the Kong arguments appear to be stronger. And I think if Kong side have fleshed out more impacts of discrimination, including bias and inequality, besides from simply counting numbers, it will literally make a much more easier decision for me to make. Overall, it's a very close debate. Thank you.
All right, so for me, I vote for the pro side. Actually, I'm a little disagree with the former judge about the predictive policing. I think in a rebuttal, the pro side directly mentioned that there's no empirical evidence about the predictive policing. So I find it not necessarily for us to use the personal data to have the predictive policing. So I don't really write these arguments on my flow paper in my final decision here. So my biggest voting issue is like the pro side's healthcare improvement versus the con side's advertisements. For me, I think the healthcare improvement have a way better impact here. So this is a sort of close debate, but a pretty clear decision for me. I think the con side don't really have a strong rebuttal on their second contention, while you give some kind of alternative to solve the problem they have already introduced. But I find it not like mutually exclusive with the use of personal data. So I find it still that the personal data can create more benefits and harms. So generally, I think the pro side did a little better job. But congratulations for the con side.
Thank you.
Okay, for me, I will make my words concise because other judges already give detailed feedback. I vote for the pro side because I think the pro side did a better job in using the data and examples to make their argument stand, while the con side did a better job in offering the mechanics or the structure of their constructive speech, which is great. For the human trafficking argument, I think the pro one, but it could be explained a little more, except the India case, because the con side also asks. And for the predictable policing, yes, that's also lack the linkage with the personal data, and I didn't buy that. So generally, from my point of view, I think pro side wins on the framework because they have bigger magnitude compared to the con side. But those two teams, all of the debaters are very excellent, and congratulations for the con side. So good luck in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good debate.
Thank you all, and now you are free to leave this room. Have a nice day. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.